Some of the opportunities are to look for places like Mamre, which provides a safe place and meaningful work, as a spot to enable that support when people are just in transition housing and needing to start to get some employment, to do some meaningful work. Something that we've spoken about is pre-prison release, because there's areas where there are increased likelihood of housing stress. So Mamre has for many years, quite a long time ago and then now, taken people as volunteer work just before they get released from prison, so that we can give them information so that they can feel respected and meaningful. And the last person that we had doing that, who left Mamre just a few weeks ago, really walked out quite differently than how she'd come in, you know, and it was wonderful to see. I think the other thing that places like Mamre, and I'm sure many other of your services, but having that easy access for people to come and do some gardening and to learn how to easily prepare that food and to have that as a very accessible thing is something that we can offer. And we're looking more at how we can take some of those community housing tenants, which Andrea and Mohammed will speak about the programs that ACHL already have got in place for this, so that we can offer employment and training at Mamre as well as the other places that they work at now. And what we're trying to do at Mamre is foster those closer links with schools and youth groups, because I think that that's also where we can do better than we are now. I mean, at Mamre, not you, but us at Mamre, to work to make sure that where there are at-risk students, and we have a number of programs for those, we do the Links program, that we are able to talk to them about their housing options before they transition out of school. But I'd really like to ask Mohammed and Andrea now about what are the key challenges that, as staff at ACHL, that you think the organisation is facing.
I've been in the sector for quite a long time, and I've seen quite significant changes, as Derek Yule has alluded before, and I can relate to that. In 2005, I attended National Housing Conference in Perth, and the State Housing Minister at that time was sharing information about the housing crisis at that time, where the concept of hotbed came up in the mining areas, where the same bed be used 3 times every 24 hours, and people paying something like $300 a day to use that. And those people are the ones that who went there to provide support services to miners, like laundry services, restaurants, and etc. So for them, it was not economically visible to go there and work there, because almost 80% of their income will be going to use a hotbed, which we share with other 2 people. So I think the fly-in, fly-out kind of scenario that Derek Yule mentioned hasn't really disappeared, it's still there. So the question for us is, what are we facing at this moment and how we overcome that? The other thing I noticed is that in the past, the real estate agents, they used to come to community housing providers, and they used to say, we have a target of having 50% of our books with you guys because you pay your rent on time or in advance. We don't have no issues. So that's what they used to trying to achieve. But today, we have to queue on Saturdays and Sundays to bid for properties to get for our tenants. So that's significant change. And what's happening in the private market is what's really causing the homelessness, because people are no longer able to afford what's in the private market. So that's just to mention about one of the challenges we face. The other challenge we face is changing government direction. And again, when you talk about homelessness, it's a national issue. It's a global issue, but more to national issue for Australia. And we have no reason to have homeless people in Australia, given where we stand economically in the global way. But the government direction and the government policies are not always harmonious, especially when you talk about the federal and the state. At one time, we had the hope that federal government was talking about housing, not the last election, the election before that. But after that, the housing more or less disappeared. At state level, there's no housing minister. At federal level, there's no housing minister. So to deal with the homelessness and not having one minister to deal with that, it's challenging because homelessness is not just a shelter. What drives homelessness is a lot of other issues we talked about earlier, about economic opportunities, about domestic violences, about dysfunctional families, about health. All these are the factors that really affect homelessness. So if you don't have one stop shop for homelessness, then dealing with those defragmented government departments is a key challenge for us. And the other challenge is that as a non-government sector, again, what's our role and how we combine our resources to make sure that our approach is also synchronized. Because the sector itself is quite defragmented, and there's a lot of duplication there. For us, as an organization, at the moment we've got over 50 support agencies that we're dealing with, but we'd rather have a handful that we could deal with to make significant difference on the ground. But dealing with a 50 organization, it takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of message out of the system. So, but having quite significant, a small number of, but significant players together, that's where we could make a difference. So these are just some of the examples of the key issues we face. I'll just add one more, which is about the matching between housing type and the demand. What we see on a daily basis is that the property that nowadays we build are mainly 1 or 2 bedroom units. And then you come to this side of the Sydney, from Canterbury all the way to Penrith, you got large families. Some of them you can't even fit 4 bedrooms. I was told the other day there was a gentleman, he had about 9 kids, and housing paying something like $3,000 a day in a motel to house them because there's no accommodation that suits for this kind of families. But when you build properties nowadays, we talk about a yield. We talk about how many more units you could build with small land that you got. And it makes a lot of economic sense, but in terms of the social outcome, it doesn't really address. So these are just examples of the issues. There's quite a long list of issues, but I think we're all more or less familiar with that. I will leave for Andrea Galloway, who's our new CEO at Affordable Housing, to say something about the opportunities. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed. As mentioned, Mohammed came from the refugee area. I came from the homeless area, from Queensland. And I don't think I've actually told the board or Rosemary too much about that. But I was a child of domestic violence and alcoholism. The age of 16, I didn't have a home, and I moved into a group home. At that point, if it wasn't for kind-hearted people, not even my relatives or anything, they brought me under to finish my high school certificate. And I went from there to university in America. And so I took this role on about 2 months ago now. I come from very much the commercial private sector of running organisations, and everyone says to me, why did you take on such a role? And I want to give something back to those people who've assisted me, and hopefully the agenda of social inclusion for all these people will we can all make a difference. So you can see affordable community housing has a makeup of a very diverse people. We all have similar vision and agendas, and hopefully we will be able to make that difference. As I said, I've been there a couple of months and coming in with fresh eyes. I agree with a lot of the things that Mohammed has said totally. To me, it's not just about affordable housing, but it's about housing affordability for this country. And I think I call it the big A, affordable housing, and the little a, housing affordability. And I think they're quite interlinked. We have a huge issue, as mentioned, in the various political agendas, all the way from the LGAs or the local government areas, interlinking and locking in with the states, various SEPs and things like that you have out there, and also then the federal government sitting on top of that. If we had a consistent approach through even the LGAs where we could build houses across a certain standard, that would be terrific. I think one of the other challenges, and I'll just add to Mohammed there, is education process for the community as a whole. People look at what we are trying to do in building developments for having people in locations that they work. They don't understand the difference between social and affordable. They automatically think that this development that people are looking at is going to be a slum of some kind in 10 years' time. They don't understand that this is actually, they might have to live in a smaller environment, but we are bringing workers to places, or we're bringing people to places that they work. They do have incomes. They can be ambulance drivers, police, nurses, all those kind of people who want to be able to live in an environment that they work. So it has to be an education process for all of us. So all of us here, if we can go out there and say, and it is a combination of social and of community affordable, but we need to educate these people that we have to have some sort of little bit more density to be able to accommodate in those particular areas. The opportunities for us to work together is amazing. One of the things that popped into my head is if anyone knows of a warehouse we could use for feeding people, that'd be great because we've run out of space. As Mohammed said, we feed about 85 families a week. We just need to get some more transportation and warehousing space. We've pretty much filled ours up, and as Oz Harvest has told us, we'll have more deliveries from the Woolies and Aldi's and Costco's of the world if we have a bigger space to feed the people in Western Sydney. So if anyone knows of anything, that would be great. But I think it's an opportunity for us all to work with a common agenda, and that is to have affordable housing affordability, so we can get people off the streets, so that we can have social inclusion for them, so that we can provide them with a better life. And there's lots of little triggers that we can have working together if we all have a similar mission and vision. So I guess the challenge is let's not just talk about it. Let's network and do something about it. Even if it's something small, if we can take one more person off the street, or if we can house one more family, that's a success for all of us. So maybe next year I'll have a bit more to say, but as I said, I've only been on board a couple of months. So thank you.